Right. I mean, there was a democratic process, and that process led to a leave decision, and Boris Johnson is simply planning to implement that decision.
Well, there was a democratic process in Scotland. The outcome of that democratic process was 62% of people voted against Brexit. But if you're basing your decision on what it means for independence, let me be very, very clear. The only sensible and logical vote is one for Scotland to remain in Europe. Well, there was a democratic process in Scotland. The outcome of that democratic process was 62% of people voted against Brexit. But if you're basing your decision on what it means for independence, let me be very, very clear. The only sensible and logical vote is one for Scotland to remain in Europe. A similar proportion voted for anti-Brexit parties in the recent European elections. My job as First Minister of Scotland is to represent those views and to do everything I can to avoid Scotland being taken out of the EU against our will, and in particular to block any attempt to take the UK out of the EU with no deal. Because Boris Johnson, no matter how hard he might try, cannot maintain that he's got a mandate for a no-deal Brexit.
Well, I mean, he's got a mandate, certainly, from this morning's result. But if your MPs and if you really wanted to, if your MPs really wanted to stop no deal, you could have got them to vote for Theresa May's deal.
Considering the SNP are trying to proclaim to the world that they intend to stop Brexit and then go on to have a referendum to rejoin the European Union as an independent nation, it would only stand to reason that them as a collective could quite easily have voted for Theresa May's deal, got it through, and then gone on to have their referendum, since they're always so keen to remind us that the referendum is just whenever Sturgeon decides to click her fingers. But of course, reality has to kick in at some point for people that seem to think the sun shines out of thin lips arse. The reality of the matter is, the policies that they've campaigned and advocated for relentlessly for the best part of 3 years contradict their claims when they say to the world that they intend to have a referendum as they've got a mandate. Their mandate would evaporate within an instant if Brexit was to be stopped. But looking at it from the worldview that they tried to present as reality, there isn't really any justification out there for the SNP to have voted against Theresa May's deal. They can't argue that it would have been damaging for the UK when in the next breath they insist that they intend to have a referendum because they've got a mandate. A mandate that, funnily enough, only ever seems to get a mention whenever no deal gets a mention. But she said it herself within this little snippet that I've played. She wishes to prevent Scotland being dragged out of the European Union against our will, quote unquote. And then she also wants to prevent Boris Johnson from steamrolling on ahead with a no-deal Brexit for the UK. Now obviously, if that was to occur, it would stand to reason there'd be nothing out there for the European Union to reopen any withdrawal agreement. As Beta Blackford continuously reminds us on a day-to-day basis, they have no intention anyway. So, if they were able to remove no deal from the equation, stand to reason that Brexit's near enough null and void at that point, thus they've got no mandate. But of course, we all know that no deal, Brexit is their priority, that must be removed. Stopping Brexit comes second, and slap bang at the bottom of the pile of priorities is independence. That's the plan B. That is a get out clause if all else fails. But it's something they don't wish to risk, because they know themselves they don't have the support they proclaim they do.
Well, Theresa May's deal was a bad deal. It would have taken us out of the EU with no clarity about what came
better
next.
Than no deal, then.
The SNP.
But surely that wouldn't have mattered, considering we've got a mandate and there's a staunch resurgence in independent support apparently. Should be no skin off their noses, you know?
We are not going to vote for things. Well, you know, it's like the fire or the frying pan. Our job is not to just always look for the least worst option.
Yeah, but you're quite prepared to scupper Brexit for the UK and then sail on your merry way on a referendum. Sail on your merry way with the second referendum and go back into the European Union, in theory. What's the difference, really? Because both would be detrimental to the UK.
Maybe old-fashioned in politics, but I still think the job of politicians should be to work for and campaign for and argue for the best for the people that they represent. And for Scotland, that is not leaving the EU at all. Now, you know, Boris Johnson has said that he's determined to leave on the 31st of October with no deal. Well,
that's if all else fails. And you're making a very compelling case for the European Union to stick to their guns. You, the same as all the rest of these crybaby Remainers.